Metaverse Summit is going to be an event that is international around technologies and business in Metaverse that is taking place from 16th to 17th July in Paris. And today we are very happy to have 4 great speakers around the decentralized autonomous organization topic, more commonly called the DAO. And so we have Jean Rerel and Arnaud Castillo from Crunch DAO, Daniel Barr from BitFWD Capital Firm, and Tamlin, the co-founder of Vega. And I let you present and introduce yourself. And Tamlin, if you want to go on.
Yeah, sure. Hey, thanks for having me here today, everyone. So yeah, my background is I was a commodity derivatives trader for many years, kind of really interested in real world markets and real world sort of financial, risk translation and how people can, use markets for their benefit. And but there's a lot of inefficiency and a lot of problems with the legacy financial system, even with computers coming and helping out. It's problematic, and especially around decision making. And so that's one of the areas of the sort of DAO or DAO scene that really interests me, is how you can make decision making more efficient, how you can make it more transparent, and how that can translate to better outcomes for people in emerging markets. So whilst I was, I helped, design and build Vega protocol, I've now left that project and I'm working on a startup, basically a sort of trading and investment fund that is specifically focused on how do you bridge like the real world markets into the DeFi ecosystem. And we're setting up to transitions, very specifically to transition to a DAO ourselves. We want to use the on-chain world to run, the organization of the company. So yeah, it's really great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And maybe Daniel, if you want to introduce yourself and what you're doing.
Hi, thank you for inviting. So yeah, my name is Daniel. I'm originally from Israel and currently based in Australia, in Kuala Land. And I've been in my past a semiconductors engineer and physicist. I did research in areas like nano and biophysics and quantum electronics, and always worked on open source community coordination. And in the last few years, my focus is on blockchain technology. And since 2018, we've been experimenting on coordinating with different open source communities using DAO technologies. So at the time, DAOs were very basic, and since then a lot has developed, and we've done quite a lot in the DAO space, building data products or building public goods now. Yeah, we'll probably discuss it over the panel. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here. Thank you. And Arnaud?
So hi, yes, thanks for having me. So I have a background of finance where I worked at Lehman Brothers and Deutsche Bank. I was also a professor of finance at ESSEC Business School, and I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. And today we're building with Jean a startup which is actually based on the DAO. It's called Crunch DAO, and the DAO is a team of researchers who can either bring data sets to the community or bring machine learning skills in order to find, the pattern in the data. And the whole point of this DAO is to provide a signal, which is like a equity research to an asset manager. And the goal of the DAO is to receive a remuneration for the work and share it with the with all the data scientists who contribute to the project. That's it.
Okay, okay, thank you. So thank you so much for your introduction. And so we're going to start the panel. So I just have a quick introduction on DAO for the audience, which is maybe new to the subject, and then we'll go on the question. So In a DAO, there are no trusted human executives since the organization is governed and operated by smart contracts, and the smart contracts are written and executed as computer code. So monitoring and enforcement of smart contracts are likewise by computer algorithms, and there are weak or non-existent mechanisms for dispute resolution since the code is low in a DAO. So all participants have agreed in advance to abide by the code of the smart contracts, and that's why DAO are decentralized. And we'll be discussing this topic. So our guideline will be to find how DAOs are a new kind of corporate governance and how can we revolutionate our world, and how can this empower the society we live in. So the DAO has begun in 2016 with the DAO first creation of the same name. And this story reminds us that a DAO weakness can also be its biggest strength, which is his code and his programming. So do you think that a DAO's code can be its only weakness? Because of the DAO story and because of what happened, millions of dollars were lost because of a programming failure. If anyone wants to answer.
Yeah, I think it's actually really interesting that you're bringing up the DAO and the DAO hack, because one, it was very aspirational when the DAO happened, and there's a lot of naivete around both how to develop it in terms of the code, and like there wasn't so much maturity in understanding how Solidity works and how reentrancy attacks can happen, which eventually led to the hack. But two, there's also like after the DAO hack, if you're kind of like going back in time, there was a bit of a post hack trauma.
Yeah,
that meant that people were not interested in working in DAOs. It was too complex, and probably it took like 2 years to get back into like really experimenting, kind of taking baby steps and not going all gung-ho, as back then it was about like 10% of the Ethereum in circulation went to the DAO or something. And addressing your point about there are no human executives because it's governed by contract. This is partially true, partially an idealistic misconception, because you can say the same about companies. There's no like, there's contracts and there's like lawyers and stuff, but actually like here we just digitized that thing and it's encoded. But then in the end of the day, if someone wants to fork, or a lot of times, even today, DAOs are implemented with admin keys, or there's like council that overwrites whatever it is that the token holders vote on, like on an off-chain platform. So all of that, like I would say just that it's very early days in the DAOs ecosystem, and it's really like beyond only the tools that, some of them are more mature than others. It's really about understanding how do we work in a digital native, borderless, jurisdiction-free environment, and then how do we kind of find both configuring the culture for who is accountable for what, as well as developing the right products that are enabling the interactions that we want to see, such that there is governance minimization, because otherwise there's like governance fatigue and all the things that we've seen in organizations that are not configured really well. But yeah, there's a lot of misconception, like DAO being this kind of utopian leaderless thing. Like my meme on that is, I think actually DAOs are not leaderless, they are leaderful, because every one member of the DAO needs to be more accountable, more responsible. And if there is otherwise like just kind of vibing kumbaya and hoping that something will happen, it's dead weight, and it's kind of what I call DAO parasites. So need to configure the culture to also like off-board. You know, there's a lot of talk about let's onboard people to our DAOs. Like, great, and then what, right? Like, you need to onboard so that people will become productive, collaborative. I think we need a lot of talk about how do we optimize so that people that are newcomers can like rise, and people that are suddenly like, you know, that they kind of need to be phased out, they can really be phased out and it won't stagnate the DAO. But yeah, this is like kind of the gist that I have as a response to your question there. And yeah, I'll be happy to hear other speakers too.
So I wanted to say something because you mentioned the code hack for the DAO project.
Yeah.
The thing is that the issue is not so much related to the DAO itself. It's the fact that in a Web3 environment, you're using a code, and you can have, and there have been many projects where there has been some issues. So it's not so much the DAO the issue here. It's just the way Web3 works and Solidity works.
Yeah.
And I think in your when you set up a DAO, the risk is not so much on the code, because today you can use a lot of open source projects which have been bulletproofed. For example, ourselves, we've used OpenZeppelin for much of our contract, even though we have adapted a little bit. But so obviously it's really scary because you can have a lot of value and money into one single contract. So if you have a problem with your code, that's a very high risk, which is a much higher risk than in a normal organization, I think, Daniel, because you compared the normal organization and a DAO Web3. If you have a problem in one of the important contracts where you have a lot of money staked to it, then it's a big issue. And last, I think that the only problem of the DAO, which was your question, is not just the code. It's also the fact that somebody can take majority and can then decide which would be a decision not in the same vision as all the stakeholders started to build the DAO for. So there's a risk of taking over the project or whatever, and that's a democratic risk, but there's still this risk.
Okay.
Yeah, I have seen some side effects like that. For example, in Curve and other protocols where people are lending their governance rights to other people because they don't know how to use the governance token. So they are selling the governance to some other entity that have financial power to buy this voting power. It's an interesting side effect from
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to look at like DAOs, their kind of critical function really is to coordinate humans around some sort of, you know, objective or objectives. And it's really interesting to me. I love this book by a guy, is he a Norwegian economist, not into crypto, but his name's Johan Norberg, and he wrote a really cool book called Open, and in it he like really highlights how as humans we've evolved the way we have and been so sort of advanced because we're really good at dividing and conquering. Like that was a really big breakthrough for us. And so that is essentially what underpins delegation-based systems. So, you know, it's like, how do you, when I have designed from scratch a few DAOs, and you're really starting with a blank sheet of paper, and you're like, how, you know, I think as Daniel said, it's sort of what behaviors do you want to see? Like, what sort of actions do you want people to take, and then how do you kind of create it in such a way that you don't get, you know, fatigue and get you get the right people making the right decisions. And to me that is far more difficult than the code side. Like, it's because we don't really yet understand human behavior on a sort of mass scale, and particularly not on a mass coordination scale. And what we've got now is the ability to experiment with that. So that's why I find it really exciting. But I do expect that as DAOs evolve, we'll be introducing a lot of the same mechanics that we see in companies and political systems, you know, around delegation, checks and balances, overrides, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think we're probably a long way away from deeply understanding, you know, sort of this mass coordinated human organization, but it's fun to be here now.
Okay, thank you. So if I have to resume, the code is not a problem anymore, and it won't be. And DAO can speed up all the functionality as Daniel showed us. It can do what the company does today, but more quickly and make it more efficient. And so the only threat is the major threat is what Arno said on one people taking the majority and doing what he wants with the majority of the DAO. Correct me if I'm wrong, but no. Okay. Okay, perfect. So if there is no more threat with the code, and because DAOs allows the alienation of trust from the owners and the managers of a firm, is the blockchain technology and the smart contracts the reason why people put trust in a DAO to prove itself trustworthy, or is it more the project the DAO want to conduct that allows itself to function as a DAO and that make people trust in it?
I would say both.
Both.
But it also depends on the project, because you may have some DAO project which are 100% relying on the code. You know, you could think of something like if you want to buy a piece of art or whatever, it could be 100% decided on the code. So that's obviously the trust will be in the code itself, even though, you know, most of the people who participate in DAOs will not understand code.
Yeah.
So that's an issue, because people will contribute but will not understand exactly the risk and obviously the coding risk. But then on more important projects, like I think like projects where the team is very important. I think the trust is built on looking what the team is building and how the team is voting and deciding on things. And also when the team is not voting, to let people who have less, you know, stake in the game take decisions also. So it's really I think trust is built over time in a DAO system, where the code is not the only part of the DAO.
Okay. Daniel or Temlin,
Yeah.
if you want to add anything.
I think it's, so first of all, like the statement of like, let's assume that there is no problems with the code is really is very aspirational, because like humans write buggy code and eventually like all code is being discovered to be needed improvement.
Yes.
But let's ignore that for a moment. I think that, yeah, it's very accurate, like that Tamlin touched on that the code is actually the easy part of the DAO. It's really getting the humans to coordinate.
I think
product is not just technology. Good product is, it's also culture. It's also like experience. It's also community. Like good product is kind of like weaving this whole thing. And then like if you're looking at DAOs and trust, so you have probably one of the really good examples is MakerDAO, which in some ways it's the first DAO actually, and it's pioneering DeFi as well. And in many ways, it's the crypto embodiment of a reserve bank, of a central bank, right? Like decentral bank, if you wish, right? With a DAO. And there's a lot of fantastic things that I think you can say to Maker. And like I salute them just on how much they really kind of trailed, like blazed the trail here for everyone. Yet even Maker has had quite a bit of flaws, whether it's technically because of the way that the code was written, and then there was the Black Thursday in, I think, 2020, where everyone was trying to rush out of the collateral debt positions because they wanted to liquidate their positions before the price drop kicked in, and basically they could lose their entire positions there. And then they had to open up collateralization with USDC, which kind of defeats the purpose of a decentralized, uncensorable bank. But anyway, these are like the technicalities. And then there's also criticism over their leadership. And some people say that there's quite a bit of opaque deals like that are between different actors that are otherwise obfuscating some of their corporate entities outside of the DAO and somehow like feeding off of all that. So like wherever you will involve humans, there will be flaws. And it's not about, like, I think that the main thing to graduate, like as fast as possible, the main thing to graduate is this idea that there is some utopian perfection that we are going to see just because we're operating in DAOs. There isn't such a place. The beauty in DAOs is not that they are perfect, it's that they are enabling things that didn't exist before. And if done with real ethos, then people will trust them, and then those organizations will gain trust. But the perfection there, it's more like a refinement thing that like over time, we're like, if you see a healthy organization keeps innovating itself and improving itself, a bad organization just like is leeching off of its members until eventually it dies. And I think that we're like in the DAO space, you're seeing the entire spectrum of you know, like everything in between. Yeah, Tamlin, any thoughts?
Yeah, Daniel, you touched on something then, and I agree with both of the previous comments actually. But you touched on something then that I consider to be really important, which is around transparency. And I think actually being transparent is extraordinarily difficult because there's always a temptation to do a side deal, hide something. You know, you may think that you're a really transparent person, but things come up that it's the shortest path. It seems like the easiest thing to do. It might even seem like the best thing for your organization. Like there's all sorts of reasons why you might choose to not be transparent, to not hurt someone's feelings or whatever. And actually what I really enjoy about sort of, you know, code as law and DAOs and all of this is there's a degree of enforced transparency at least. But, you know, as Daniel said, there's human nature and we most certainly cannot just simply expect, you know, smart contracts to replace that. But I think could be interesting one day is if, you know, the participants of a DAO are smart contracts, not humans. And then I think you start to get into some kind of interesting situations where you're not having your maybe our sort of evolved tendencies to obfuscate and be human are not there, but that's very esoteric and futuristic.
Self-driving DAOs.
Exactly. But yeah, just I mean, back to like code, like just pure code stuff. I mean, I've done a bit of programming in that time, and it's just, you know, QA and testing and surfacing stuff, surfacing attack vectors, surfacing, you know, publishing all the stuff you're doing, including, you know, all your audits and all of the weaknesses, and, you know, running incentives to get people to try and attack this thing is so much better, in my opinion, than trying to pretend that you're perfect and then try and sell that and sort of lure people in. That just seems like contradictory, but it's time consuming and expensive. So yeah.
Okay, thank you all. I have a more specific question about Crunch DAO for Arnaud and Jean, and it is can we assimilate the researchers' action in Crunch DAO to a good integration of a human within a DAO, or is it more like a human action certified by the DAO and that ensures the trust people's put in the Crunch DAO process?
Well, it's a difficult question here.
Yeah.
I think again, I think it's going both ways, because we are because everything is not yet organized in a DAO in our case, and we're building it because you have the vote, which is one thing, So the voting system is very simple because everybody has a vote. You have a token, you have one vote. And so we are organizing different issues where people can vote to decide what to go first, what should be done first, and so on. But also what we want to do is that when people, when data scientists work and send predictions, we want this to be somewhere in the blockchain. And then we could making sure that it's totally transparent. And I think this is also the good thing about that everything is on chain. Because if everything is on chain, then everything is transparent and you can track everything that's happening, as you were saying before. So I think it's both ways. And also you have a lot of mechanism, as we talked about, like liquidity pools and staking, which for us are very important, because when data scientists give a prediction, if he's confident with his prediction, he can stake on his predictions, and so he's having stake in the game. And we like to see that the data scientist who is confident with what he does, the work that he brings to the DAO, he will get a higher reward because he has staked more on his predictions. So yes, the whole system is really on both hands. That's what I would say. And maybe Jean, you want to add more into the discussion?
You used to say something that I like, Arnaud. You say like it's about going from shareholder to stakeholder, kind of, and how they can, how everyone is taking care, and how the value goes from really flows from the real value creator and from the value proposition to the value creator. But I think it's more the second case from the two options you gave, like trying to certify what humans are doing. And actually we have robots participating in the tournament now already. So we have auto ML softwares that are starting to compete with the human and that are earning tokens. The thing is that there is still a human behind that is taking the governance earned by the robot participating in the tournament. So that's some interesting ground that we are getting in. I'm very interested about where it will go and how this governance will be affected maybe. It's very interesting things. Anyway, the goal is to put people in the position where they can get the most out of their particular set of skills. And this is what we try to give to the member of the DAO.
I wanted to jump in and just go back to this idea of going from shareholder mechanism and corporate governance to stakeholder. And I think this is, for me, the main philosophy behind the DAO approach. In a normal organization, basically the money or the profits are going to the shareholders. And what we want is a system. Maybe Jean, you can unmute.
Sorry.
And so we want a system where all the token holders are basically getting the reward of what is being achieved by the DAO. So it's really moving from shareholders to stakeholders. And you can think maybe, you know, sometimes I feel like the shareholders or capitalism is a little bit broken when I see currently what is happening on Twitter. So maybe we'll find out that it's not broken. But if somebody wants to buy, it's like if you want to buy other tokens and just few people who don't own the token decides not to sell them, I would think this is not the best, say, democratic way to do it. I would imagine if you had a DAO, you would just put a vote and say, okay, who wants to sell their tokens at what price? You would find a solution and the price, and that would happen. And the guy who wants to take the company private would make it, or the project private would make it private. And I think really moving to something where code is low, it makes much more transparency, and it's better and more efficient, even capitalism approach. And I think we should maybe think that any corporation could move to a system like that, because token holders could just put any question to the board or to the DAO, and you could decide, you know, who wants this question to be on the top, and then you would just vote for it, and everybody would have their voice. So I think this is the tendency and where the world should go.
Okay, Okay, yeah, very interesting, and yes, further efficiency. Okay, and so because previously we said that because of human intervention, and that's why we are human, but it's the only reason there will be flows in a DAO. Do you think that a human checking like a board of human just with an inspection role in a DAO can be a good thing to avoid any misconduct in a DAO process, like to avoid a hack or to avoid a bad decision?
Well, I think Tamlin had the answer to that. If I'm correct, is if you obviously, because human can make mistakes, there will always be some problems, and so you have to acknowledge that we do mistakes. And I think it's the difference between the normal corporation where the boss and people want to show that perfect and so on. I think in DAO you have to say, okay, we are a team and nobody's perfect, but if we work together, we can find the problems. And this is the idea of putting a bounty, and to say if somebody finds the problem in the code, they have bounties, and we should all work on finding that there is a problem in the code until we can say there's no problem in the code.
Okay. Okay. If you want to add anything, Daniel or Tamlin, or it's just what you said previously. So, and do you think of a particular DAO or a method that that have worked today and has permitted to gain users' trust quickly and efficiently, or is the trust process very long, and that's why? And because we are at the beginning of DAOs and it's very young, so people do not know much about it, and is this the major difficulty to develop DAO to gain users?
We don't hear you, Daniel.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, mute. So it's a great question because it's also a matter of definition. And I remember like when DAO experimentation started becoming more of a topic of interest for the greater crypto community, some people would say, hey, you know what? Bitcoin is the original DAO, right? And then like, who are the stakeholders in the DAO? In Bitcoin case, it would be the miners that they choose to operate certain protocol and not others. And they can also signal towards being in favor of certain improvements being accepted. So you see it, for example, before Taproot, they needed to reach a certain threshold before they felt like, okay, they're going to roll out this improvement. And you see it, you know, for example, some people like Bitmain, which is like a major player in the ecosystem, ended up going with BCH, right? Which historically, I think, is probably like cost them like becoming a lot less relevant than they were back then. So I think that all of this is just, it's really related to how you define DAOs. And I think we already see those examples from those like more low level protocol layer where people are like, there's different stakeholders and the participation is truly permissionless and decentralized. So in some senses, it's already gained trust, right? Because you can interact with it permissionlessly. That means it's trustless, so to speak, if the meme, you know, we abide by the meme. And then if you're talking about the more kind of contemporary DAOs of today, which is whether it's like the maker example that we mentioned from earlier, which you see that like, you know, trust is a lot more dynamic there. Like suddenly someone can not trust them so much and prefer to use USDC or USDT, which is entirely trusted and censorable. Or if you're looking at even newer DAOs, like there's the like DAO de jour, if you wish, right? There's the like now Moonbird, I think, the NFT DAOs, or there's like DAOs that are kind of only for accredited investors, opened by open law guys with the tribute framework. So you have basically DAOs for just a select group of few people. and they trust it because they work with the lawyers and stuff. And then in some senses, what's the point of having a DAO in the first place if all what you're doing is augmenting a bunch of digital transaction on existing legacy, like legacy contracts? So I think that it really depends on what do you define as DAO. If you want to see certain, like how to gain trust or how trust is dynamically evolving, if you wish. And then, like you work backwards from there. Like, is our DAO hardcore, like low-level protocol? Is our DAO something like anchored in legacy jurisdictions? Is our DAO like fully digital native? And then, like, we work backwards from there on how to do the culture configuration that Tamlin was saying. Like DAO organization structuring is like the challenge at question, I think.
Okay.
Actually, both of you have really made me think about, like, all of you really made me think about, kind of like you were saying, I know, like the stakeholders, shareholders become stakeholders, that transition. In a way, that's what DeFi protocols are, really. And, and that's codified into, if you do this kind of behavior, like place liquidity or whatever, you get these rewards. And to me, I've never really thought of DeFi protocols as DAOs, although they are coordinating a whole bunch of humans through codified means. But it's interesting. I think I've always thought about DAOs as like when you need to make the off-chain decisions, like what parameter is going to go into that DeFi protocol. Kind of what you're alluding to, Daniel, with Bitcoin. It's like, which version of the code, how you sort of upgrade and stuff. It's sort of like, it sort of requires human decision making to absorb all the information, debate and discuss, and then make a decision, which I guess is like investment DAOs and anyone who's sort of managing a code base or something. But I guess it's all on the spectrum of that sort of coordination and that sort of establishment of stakeholders and rewarding them accordingly.
Okay, yeah. And so and so do you think because of that, do you think the future of DAOs are more like their massive adoption, firstly by firms to make their process more easier and quicker and to speed up and to empower the firm, or will it be more like I don't know, a DeFi process finance that will adopt it and use it mostly at first, or any domains in particular?
So I think that if we're talking about the new and emerging DAOs, if you wish, and the whole like part of this recent enthusiasm around DAOs, the way that I see it is like my mental frame for that is, it's very much, if we had in Web 2, we had social media, right? Social media basically was democratizing the experience of being a celebrity. It democratized the experience of, I'm someone that has some representation, there's some photos of me, there's some content that I write, and then like before that, like you needed to be some celebrity in order for people to follow you and care about you and like for you to be this creator. So it unlocked the long tail of creators to come in and be influencers and whatever, right? And I think that if you map this into Web3, DAOs are democratizing the experience of being a politician. And if you think about what is the job of a politician, it's
you freezed.
Yeah.
That are elected in order to manage shared resources, public good, ideally, right? And then DAOs in that context, suddenly like you're unlocking for kids to come together and manage shared resources, for people that before that never had access to manage shared resources can now participate in this experience in their own way, from demographics that otherwise wouldn't have accessibility from regions in the world that now have connectivity to the internet, you know, Starlink and whatnot. You can be in the outback or in Africa or whatever. So I think like this is a lot more important. Like the unlocking of the long tail is opening things that you can't even imagine today. I think that like disrupting the legacy financial institution and stuff, it's more of a byproduct. It's not so much, we don't need to fight it so much. It's like you open the dam here, the floodgates are open, and you're giving people the tools to basically like build just something far more superior than the legacy institutions. Just, they're becoming irrelevant over time. It's not even like you know, it's like everything else with entrepreneurship. Once you're providing something that's like 10, 100x better, then it's not a competition anymore. It's just like, you know, and we're starting to see this migration towards, I think, you know, the experience of shared resource management. So DAOs are basically like digital native productive output coordination mechanism, right? Initially capital coordination with VC DAOs or protocol DAOs and all that stuff, but eventually like just hard to think. It's like, you know, the imagination is our limit, right? That's beautiful. It's a general purpose technology. Yeah, that's my riff about, you know, the future of what we will enable.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Daniel. Tamlin or Arno, I don't know if you get on with this view on the future of DAOs.
Yeah, I think it was a great presentation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for your participation, and we're done with the DAO panel, and thank you all to have here and to have taken the time to respond all the question, and Yingzi, thank you for the organization. So yeah,
thanks a lot. Thanks everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, goodbye.